Welcome back to our channel where we share updates and untold stories about Catherine, Princess of Wales, and her royal family. Today we bring you some news. King Charles makes a banning order after Camilla demands the Queen's property for her family. A previously confidential administrative matter within the royal household has intensified into a significant internal crisis at Buckingham Palace, centered on allegations that Queen Camilla sought to appropriate items from Queen Elizabeth Roman II's personal collection for the advantage of her family members. An archive inventory has transformed into a dynastic dispute that, according to many palace sources, led King Charles Roman III to rescind certain royal rights and privileges from his wife. The decision has reverberated across the institution, prompting urgent questions about the monarchy's internal cohesion, the administration of its material heritage, and the stability of the new reign. The episode recounts the diligent efforts of the Royal Collection Trust, the institution responsible for classifying and safeguarding the significant personal possessions of the late Queen after her death. The Trust employs curatorial and archival techniques akin to those of renowned museums and has long been responsible for preserving objects that conflate emotional nostalgia with civic significance. It is crucial to distinguish this collection from the custodians of the crown jewels. The latter are legally owned by the state and employed in formal ceremonies under specific statutory regulations. Whereas the late Queen's personal collection comprised tens of thousands of items accumulated over a 7-decade reign, paintings, jewelry, textiles, letters, photographs, medals, ceremonial insignia, and other artifacts that she had either received or acquired. The provenance of any specific piece sometimes includes personal donations, diplomatic transactions, and institutional representations, making the legal and ethical classification of such objects very problematic. Archivists and curators associated with the Trust see these relics as historical documents and cultural treasures. They comply with established museum and archive standards, including precise accessioning catalog entries with distinct identities, thorough provenance documentation, safe storage and climate, controlled vaults, and rigorously restricted access governed by recorded loans and movement records. The Trust's undertaking is painstaking and challenging, since each item signifies not only a product but a crucial component in a broader narrative of state ritual, individual memory, and national identity. The late Queen's approach to her collection affected the archivist's duties. Elizabeth Roman II was very diligent. She preserved extensive archives and understood the symbolic importance of many objects, what they represented about the continuity of the crown, its relationship with the nation, and the stories linked to state events. On other instances, the late Queen penned handwritten notes or orders about the destiny of certain things, offering an additional layer of historical evidence that archivists deem significant to an object's provenance. The comments ranged from casual marginal notes to detailed directives on disposal loans and use settings for items. When available, such guidelines provide curators with a definitive mandate. When absent, they engender interpretive ambiguity that may result in discord among family members, domestic staff, and the institutional stewards of Crown heritage. The first indications of issues arose inside this rigorous archival context. At secured locations on the Windsor estate, where teams were methodically cataloging and reconciling artifacts from the late Queen's collections, curators noted discrepancies between the real holdings and the official records. Initially, the discrepancies were little and easily justifiable: an absent label from a container, a momentary misplacement during preservation activities, or an administrative error in accession numbers. Such challenges are common when overseeing a collection of this scale and complexity. Catalogues developed over decades may include shorthand unfamiliar to younger employees. Physical relocations for conservation may exceed the available documentation. long-serving workers could understand unique methods that are insufficiently documented. The Trust's personnel expected a period of reconciliation and rectification. However, as the practice evolved, a pattern emerged that went beyond ordinary administrative mistakes. Objects listed as present were untraceable in their assigned vaults. Movement records were inconsistent with physical transfers, and some objects of considerable public interest, jewels seen in photographs and recordings of state events, appeared to be absent. For archivists and curators, these missing artifacts were not only significant, but also priceless, since they were relics linked to certain periods in national history. The absence of previously considered secure continuous custodial care escalated the review from a routine audit to a potential institutional infraction. An early famous outlier was a sapphire and diamond brooch, the adornment worn by the late Queen on her Sapphire Jubilee in 2017. This brooch was essential to a significant royal event and had both ceremonial and personal importance related to a 70th anniversary celebration. Upon examining the specified vault location of the brooch, the curators found it missing. An analysis of the Trust's official loan records movement, logs, and authorizations revealed no sanctioned removal. The absence of permission signified that the item had left its secure custody without the requisite documentation. The symbolic importance of that particular brooch worn at a time when the nation and monarch celebrated an extraordinary duration of service heightened anxiety. An item so publicly associated with a crucial jubilee should not be missing. Subsequent inquiries uncovered other troubling absences. A 3-strand pearl necklace, notably worn by the late Queen during the funeral of Diana, Princess of Wales, was missing from its assigned storage place. The undocumented journals kept by Elizabeth Roman II during the CO-19 lockdown were very sensitive, since they are thought to capture the monarch's reflections at a period of considerable national upheaval and change. The diaries possess significant historical value and personal significance. Their loss elevated the issue from a simple inventory error to a matter of privacy, national history, and the integrity of archive operations. The potential eradication of personal writings without documented consent intensified worry inside the household and among external observers worried about the safeguarding of archival materials. For historians, royal protocol and internal security policies required that such issues be handled with utmost discretion. The Trust and Palace officials first saw the discrepancies as an internal matter, initiating a quiet formal investigation overseen by the Royal Security Director, Sir Clement Mallister. Mallister, a senior official at Scotland Yard, was acknowledged inside the family for his methodical, evidence-driven approach. His duties included both physical security and the investigative follow-up of irregularities pertaining to the royal estates and collections. His team started by analyzing access logs to the secure vaults containing the disputed items, as well as reviewing CCTV video staff schedules, escorted movement records, and the chain of custody documentation related to loans for exhibitions or private use. A significant technical revelation emerged from that inquiry: the use of an outdated defunct override security code to gain entry to a restricted archive area. The code, originally from 2014, was officially retired but continues to function inside the obsolete system. Legacy code is prevalent in intricate technological environments. When systems undergo incremental updates, many access mechanisms may develop over time. The persistent functioning of a deactivated code revealed a deficiency in the security architecture. Deactivation had not been uniformly applied across redundant or legacy controllers. Access to historical override codes is often rigorously controlled, with knowledge limited to a certain set of long-serving personnel. Security data revealed that Queen Camilla is among the few persons retaining knowledge of the code. While technological evidence provided an initial advantage, Corroborative testimony from domestic workers substantially bolstered the case circumstantially. Staff members who had previously been hesitant began collaborating with investigators. In strictly hierarchical and loyalty-driven family environments, reluctance dominates. Workers fear the repercussions of expressing their views impacting both their job security and familial relationships. The multitude of remarks from various members suggested that the issue had permeated the household's sense of appropriateness. A guard at Windsor Castle described a late evening visit by Queen Camilla to the area containing portions of the royal collection. The guard saw that she was followed by a senior aide carrying what seemed to be a velvet-lined container. On a separate occasion, a member of the domestic staff at Clarence House discreetly told detectives that she had seen Camilla wearing jewelry often associated with the late Queen at a private family gathering. A colleague, a driver, confessed to having accompanied the Queen consort on an impromptu discreet visit to a high-end jeweler in Mayfair, described as a personal repair appointment. Each observation, when seen in isolation, may have seemed commonplace or unimportant. Nevertheless, together they formed a narrative that corresponded with the documentary and technical anomalies. The investigation reached a critical juncture when a chambermaid at Ray Mill House, Queen Camilla's private residence in Wiltshire, discovered a jewelry box hidden under linens in a guest room. The discovery illustrates how operational details may be crucial in ordinary domestic job unveiled the extraordinary. The chambermaid, concerned about the potential discovery of a valuable royal diamond on private property and uncertain of the right procedure, informed a senior housekeeper. The housekeeper, recognizing the seriousness of the matter, sent the information to Sir Clement's team. Upon commencing the inquiry, officials recovered the missing sapphire Jubilee brooch. The presence of that historically significant diamond in Camilla's private property, removed from the secure custody of the Royal Collection Trust, transformed an administrative anomaly into a major scandal. The brooch was swiftly retrieved and returned to the Trust's secure storage. Nonetheless, the discovery created a chain of evidence directly linking the object to the Queen consort. The previous capacity of palace representatives to ascribe the inconsistencies to cataloging errors or temporary misplacements has been compromised by the revelation of the brooch, prompting a more thorough assessment, a possible breach of trust inside the royal household. The finding of a tangible object deeply infused with public memory on private property was seen by many as not only a procedural error, but also a symbolic gesture that would impact the evaluation of the family's stewardship of the nation's heritage. King Charles got regular briefings from his security and domestic staff as the investigation advanced. Initially, he and his colleagues may have seen the contradictions as matters to be resolved discreetly and secretly. This conformed to centuries of royal tradition. Family and personal matters were often maintained in secrecy to avoid unnecessary public scrutiny. The retrieval of a substantial and symbolically important item from Camilla's private quarters changed the evaluation. The king was confronted with irrefutable evidence that a gem closely associated with his late mother's public life and held inside the institutional collection had been unlawfully appropriated and found in the possession of his spouse. The news incited intense family meetings and strategic discussions. Individuals apprised at the highest levels included Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, and Prince William, the Prince of Wales. Princess Anne, regarded inside the family as a reliable guardian of duty and protocol, was one of the first persons to be fully informed about the recovery. Her reputation for rigorous commitment to procedure and her unwavering emphasis on institutional continuity above personal sensitivity made her reaction exceptional. Insiders described her response as one of frigid fury. She allegedly remarked, "Mother's instructions were clear. Certain items were irrevocably classified as Crown property. Their extraction from the vault represents a flagrant breach of her commitment and trust. This statement articulated a rigorous interpretive position that specific artifacts had been deliberately maintained as essential to the Crown's legacy rather than regarded as personal belongings. Prince William, the heir apparent, and a significant proponent of the monarchy's modernizing efforts, was also approached. His stance was seen as rigid. He underscored to his father the need of confronting the matter with transparency. "We have suffered the consequences of secrets in the past," he allegedly said to the king. "The truth ultimately emerges, and with each disclosure, it erodes public confidence. We must address this matter forthrightly rather than allowing it to linger and compromise the institution." The prince's viewpoint underscored reputational risk and institutional integrity. He contended that attempts to conceal the incident would exacerbate public doubt and in turn threaten the monarchy's legitimacy. His participation illustrated a broader generational evaluation of the need for the monarchy to adapt to an information environment marked by frequent disclosures and where obscurity breeds skepticism. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had a restrained public demeanor throughout the internal deliberations, but was said to align with her husband's position. In private talks, she and other senior family members recognized that transparency, or a kind of responsibility that prioritized honesty, was increasingly seen as essential for the Crown's future viability. This signified a broader generational shift within the family towards a more modern media approach to conflict resolution. It also showed a willingness to hold even senior family members accountable when institutional integrity was undermined. The Princess of Wales, aware of the fragility of public opinion, allegedly recommended caution in managing the situation. The family's reaction may either mitigate or intensify the issue in the eyes of a public attuned to both image and reality. When directly inquired about the retrieved brooch, Queen Camilla did not refute her ownership of the artifact. Palace officials said that she sought to frame her actions as manifestations of personal gratitude and purported private obligations. She defended her stance by asserting that in private conversations the late queen had assured her that certain items would be bestowed to her as personal gifts. She referenced precedents within the family members of the extended royal household, including the Princess of Wales and the Duchess of Sussex, had both been seen wearing jewelry that belonged to Diana, Princess of Wales, and argued that she was being unfairly targeted. "If they are praised for wearing items that belong to Diana," she reportedly said, "why am I condemned for keeping something that was promised to me?" The argument aimed at contextualizing her actions within a framework of intergenerational gifting and inheritance encountered substantial resistance from her opponents in the royal family. Princess Anne clearly articulated a definitive distinction. Not all objects possess equal status. Some are personal gifts, whilst others are categorized as institutional assets subject to certain limitations. The Princess Royal allegedly said, because those were designated as personal gifts to her sons, differentiating between items intentionally bestowed as private remembrance and those the late Queen had allocated for permanent ownership by the Crown. The Princess Royal and others emphasized that documentation handwritten notes from Elizabeth Roman II linked to particular items illuminated these intentions. In other cases, such instructions purportedly used unambiguous language, with some items like the Malta sapphire cross specified with conditions such as to remain with the Crown, never to depart British soil. The presence of such particular annotations impeded Camilla's defense. Although informal interpretations of heirlooms may be justifiable, the existence of written instructions attached to particular things signifies a more formalized intent and a binding obligation within the family. Moreover, several lost artifacts were not only decorative, they functioned as symbols of national heritage worn at formal occasions and seen by countless individuals. Eliminating them from the viewpoint of institutional advocates represented an obstruction to the tangible mechanisms of constitutional symbolism. The distinction between private ownership and public stewardship has become increasingly evident. Items in the royal collection fulfills civic roles, aiding in the ceremonial and visual representation of governance. When these items are transferred to private ownership, the outcome is not merely personal profit, but the reduction of communal ritual resources. A ceremonial gathering convened by the king in the blue drawing room at Clarence House provided the setting for a significant familial conflict. The blue drawing room, a private, historically important space inside the royal estate, was the venue for a familial conflict and a constitutional discussion. According to aides, attendees entered a fraught atmosphere. The recovered sapphire Jubilee brooch was placed in the middle of the table's display case, an item whose subtle presence underscored the importance and irony of the event. Charles started the proceedings with a statement asserting that, according to several accounts, he intertwined personal sorrow with a sense of royal obligation. "This is not about us as a family," he said, his voice allegedly strained with emotion. "This concerns the crown, my mother's inheritance, and the grave duty we hold with the nation." Queen Camilla adopted a defensive posture. Sources depicted her as contesting the depiction of her activities as improper, asserting that palace insiders who had never fully accepted her were orchestrating a campaign to discredit her reputation. She disclosed to investigators that Princess Anne had persistent concerns and that Prince William was using the issue to bolster his public image. The claims, however, indicative of Camilla's desire to contextualize her conduct, did not persuade her critics, who emphasized facts and precedent. The conversation was frank and determined. It addressed years of relationship tension and placed them within a constitutional framework where personal affection must yield to institutional duty. Prince William's participation in the conference was, according to contemporary reports, forthright and passionate. He cited his grandmother's lifetime commitment and the institutional legacy she created. "My grandmother devoted her entire life to preserving the integrity of this institution," he purportedly said. "She cultivated a foundation of trust over 70 years. This conduct endangers the endeavor, suggesting that the collection is a private possession rather than a national legacy." The prince's remarks framed the dispute as a matter of principle rather than a personal insult, rejecting Camilla's assertion of being unfairly singled out. He explicitly challenged the notion that ownership or retention of things could be considered a private familial right when the items had been unequivocally recognized as part of the crown's legacy. Princess Anne delivered what several observers saw as the conclusive admonition. In a direct address to the Queen Consort, she purportedly stated, "Mother designated that brooch as crown property. You perceived it as a personal inheritance for your granddaughter. This is not a misunderstanding. It is a betrayal not only of Charles, but of every citizen who entrusted her." These remarks encapsulated the dual nature of the familial conflict. It was both personal and civic, and from the Princess Royal's viewpoint, it represented a violation of public trust. Her involvement underscored that the disagreement transcended personal issues, entering a domain where the family as institutional stewards embodied a broader political entity. Confronted with an abundance of documentary evidence, staff testimonies, and the unwavering positions of his sister and successor, King Charles, reached a significant personal and constitutional decision. Sources described his personality as resolute but melancholic. "I have championed your cause for decades," he said to Camilla. According to witnesses, "I defended you when the world questioned our relationship. However, this I cannot condone." In a symbolic gesture that aides later deemed definitive, he closed the display case containing the brooch with a resolute click. The gesture was a clear assertion of ownership and a performative specification of boundaries. The king signified that personal loyalty must be subordinate to constitutional duty. The king thereafter communicated a number of urgent consequences. Queen Camilla was to be promptly barred from doing official ceremonial duties. Her access to the royal collection was revoked, and all rights formerly associated with her family about that collection were terminated. Sources said that Charles explained his decision sprang from a duty to preserve the sanctity of the crown and his mother's legacy rather than from a desire for personal vengeance. He allegedly stated, "You were my wife, but the crown transcends us both. I will not permit it to be undermined." Queen Camilla, astonished and mute, rose and departed the room. Sound of the door closing indicated, according to observers, the formal termination of a decade-or-so-long relationship and the commencement of a crisis with substantial public implications. Despite efforts by various home members to manage the consequences privately, the story was out. Within 48 hours, the specifics of the Clarence House altercation and the king's explicit restrictions on his wife's official responsibilities were publicly revealed. Media groups worldwide exploited the narrative. A provocative headline characterized the incident as King Charles expels Camilla over Queen's fortune. The story permeated traditional and social media, eliciting a mix of outrage, schadenfreude, and weary fascination among international audiences. Following the publishing of the article, the dynamics shifted public sentiment rather than just private family politics became a crucial element affecting the royals' reaction. The popular reaction in Britain was intense. The first photographs of Queen Camilla after the revelations had her leaving Ray Mill House in a vehicle, her face obscured by oversized sunglasses. The portrayal implied a figure in withdrawal rather than a confident consort. For several members of the public who had gradually accepted Camilla inside the royal family, some with hesitation, some with eagerness, the allegation that she had profaned the memory of Queen Elizabeth II was an unacceptable violation. Critics said that the notion of a consort using the late monarch's belongings for personal gain would be politically and morally untenable. Advocates of Camilla said that grief and personal gifts are complex matters, and that a too severe public response may seem vindictive. King Charles's subsequent public appearances were scrutinized for signs of composure or agitation. At an appearance in Oxford, he faced vocal questioning over the incident, which he chose not to answer promptly. Observers noted the gravity of his public manner, while media commentators swiftly construed his previous private reluctance as a failure in leadership for not aggressively confronting the matter. The analysis revealed a complicated paradox. The king's personal loyalty to his wife must be balanced with the exigencies of the state and the weight of public expectations. The dispute illustrates that a constitutional monarchy depends on symbolic trust. When this trust is seen as compromised, the sovereign's capacity to exercise moral power is weakened. In contrast, both Prince William and Princess Anne saw an enhancement in their public image. Their decisions to promote transparency and underscore institutional integrity resonated with a segment of the public and with observers who value dedication to duty. A remark ascribed to William during the family dispute, "You may wear the crown, but you will never own her memory," gained considerable momentum on social media and was seen as emblematic of his perceived stewardship of tradition and moral integrity. Subsequent polling suggested a notable rise in public support for Prince and Princess Anne's proactive position. One research found that more than 75% of participants approved William's dedication to addressing the problem publicly. For William, the occasion offered an opportunity to present himself as a guardian of propriety, aligning with the more institutionalist segments of the monarchy's followers. The Princess of Wales was often depicted in the media as an emblem of stability. Her public agenda continued with little disruption, and widely circulated images of her engaging in charitable endeavors such as comforting a child at a hospice while wearing a modest pearl pendant bolstered a narrative of stability and continuity that sharply contrasted with the turmoil at Clarence House. The disparity between the poised public service of some royal family members and a private familial catastrophe shaped public perceptions of the reliability of royalty members in times of adversity. Media framing often depicts Catherine and William as the avant-garde embodiment of the institution, but Anne's sternness appeals to those who value duty above all else. The catastrophe also had ramifications outside Britain. In Commonwealth states, where debates over republicanism and the monarchy often reemerge, the scandal provided fresh ammunition for advocates of republicanism. Media coverage in Australia and Canada expressed apprehensions about the ability of a hereditary institution to sustain public trust amid divisions caused by personal scandal among its custodians. In the United States, late-night television and opinion columnists derived material for satire and critique, often portraying the episode as emblematic of the royal family's continual capacity to create high-drama situations. Across Europe, onlookers drew historical parallels to monarchs who had similar dilemmas between personal loyalty and public duty. The episode spurred Republicans and political adversaries to call for constitutional revision, while monarchists saw it as an urgent need for institutional restoration and improved governance clarity. The extent of public criticism has broadened throughout time. Initially, outrage was directed at Queen Camilla, but attention rapidly transitioned to questions over King Charles's judgment and his capacity to reconcile family loyalty with constitutional duties. Critics said that more timely and rigorous management of inventory controls and public disclosure may have prevented the situation from escalating into a tragedy. The issue thus evolved, if only momentarily, from a discourse about missing jewels to an assessment of the monarch's effectiveness. Approval ratings demonstrated similar trends. Camilla's popularity reportedly fell to historic lows for a consort in modern history, while the king's approval diminished despite the increasing support for William and Anne. Pollsters and political scientists noted that the monarchy's image depends on stable government. One misstep might influence perceptions for years. Institutionally, the immediate material concern seemed to be alleviated. The recovered items were placed in safe custody, and palace security personnel began assessments of access protocols, digital records, and legacy code security. The technical answer requires a thorough evaluation of access privileges, the elimination of obsolete credentials, and maybe a whole overhaul of antiquated security equipment. This undertaking is costly and laborious, but crucial for restoring confidence among workers and the public. Nonetheless, the reputational damage endured. Archivists saw that several sealed trunks containing the late Queen's personal effects, letters, diaries, and artifacts located in Sandringham and Balmoral remained unopened and uncatalogued. The incident intensified public conjecture if a single brooch could elicit such chaos. What may be hidden in the unopened trunks that might stir more disturbance? The possibility of further unknown or contested things represented a continual source of uncertainty that the institution must resolve. Divisions within the royal family worsened. The crisis had positioned siblings and generations in conflict with one another in ways that were apparent, although not entirely revealed to the public. Extended challenges of duty inheritance and the distribution of symbolic capital received increased focus. King Charles had the dual problems of restoring trust in his leadership and managing the emotional distress resulting from a publicly constrained marriage. He and the larger institution confront a pivotal choice on their future course of action. An approach would be to enhance traditional confidentiality, handling further discoveries internally while maintaining the established practice of limited public disclosure. An alternative would be to improve transparency by disseminating detailed inventories that clarify ownership and provenance of disputed items while changing internal governance to avoid recurrent infractions. Each approach has risks and potential benefits. A renewed commitment to secrecy may momentarily preserve some dignities, but also provoke accusations of obscurantism and resistance to modernization. Enhanced openness may strengthen public confidence by demonstrating responsibility and institutional reform. Yet it also risks exacerbating controversy, by disclosing more potentially sensitive material for public scrutiny. They challenge confronting the king, and his advisors transcends mere domestic administration. It is a strategic issue about the monarchy's relationship with the British public and the constitutional obligations that bind it to the nation. Constitutional scholars contend that the monarchy functions as both a private family and a public institution, with its stewardship of material culture being crucial to its legitimacy. A multitude of reform proposals were put out in private discussions and by commentators after the occurrence. A proposal was put out to create an autonomous trustee or board for the royal collection, vested with legislative power to address providence issues and to manage a public register of items designated as crown property. A further suggestion recommended the formalization of written bequests and the digital distribution of annotated inventories, allowing historians and the public to understand the provenance and intended distribution of significant objects. A third set of proposals called for a thorough overhaul of digital security systems, mandatory auditing intervals, and a confidential whistleblower channel for staff who report irregularities. Each reform option necessitates navigating the complexities of royal protocol privacy laws and the preservation of historically significant objects, while also fulfilling the public's legitimate need for transparency. The episode has exposed significant cultural questions about the monarchy's adaptation to modern governance and accountability requirements alongside institutional modifications. The Crown's endurance is contingent upon intangible public trust rather than physical magnificence. Historic objects and ceremonial dress function as significant symbols owing to their curation and preservation as shared history. When private activities are seen as harmful to that stewardship, the damage extends beyond the monetary value of any one asset. The current situation demonstrates the fragility of the institution's credibility when compliance with established norms clashes with personal relationships. Legal experts also saw difficulties. The distinction between private property and crown property may be contentious, especially when a long-serving sovereign's personal belongings include state gifts or items used in official capacities. Ownership decisions include both testamentary evidence and public law considerations, whether an item is designated for the benefit of future monarchs or meant to be affiliated with the Crown as an institution rather than an individual. In court, these matters may become protracted. Outside of court, political and reputational factors often dictate settlement outcomes. The palace's preference for internal resolution suggests a desire to avoid judicial processes. Nonetheless, the limitations of this approach were confronted by public calls for accountability. The royal family is entering a likely prolonged period of repair and adjustment with clear overarching ramifications. The present decisions about the management of the collection transparency and the monarchy's approaches to punishing and rehabilitating those who breach institutional norms may shape public perceptions for years to come. The problem has shown a public expectation that those with ceremonial and moral authority must conform to standards commensurate with the power and symbolism they represent, reaching beyond the immediate circle of palace officials and senior royals. The legal or procedural outcomes of the internal inquiry, together with the possible recovery of further items or the appearance of fresh revelations, have already altered the dynamics of the contemporary monarchy. King Charles Roman III has the challenge of reinforcing institutional safeguards while repairing publicly damaged personal connections. His option to either fortify a non-transparent institutional barrier or to steer his household towards a more transparent approach will be consequential. The program will include not just technology solutions for security and cataloging, but also cultural and communicative reforms that align the monarchy's private home life with its public responsibilities. The event clearly demonstrates that the monarchy's survival depends not only on jewels or ceremonial traditions, but on the fragile and now strained reservoir of public trust that legitimizes its continued involvement in national matters. The Crown's response through reform, apology, restoration, or retrenchment will reflect its ability to fulfill contemporary accountability standards while preserving its historic ceremonial authority. For an organization whose symbolic capital is its foremost asset, the management of subsequent actions will test the feasibility of reconciling tradition with modernity in the stewardship of a shared national heritage. Thank you for watching the video.